Hello, my name is Mary Philpott, and I'm in the Lee Library Art Gallery, and I'm here today with Bruce Laird. He is an artist whose work is in the gallery, and Bruce and I are going to take you on a tour of this work. He has collages, he has photography, and paintings. I think you'll enjoy this tour. Our first piece in this show is Bruce's self-portrait, second grade, and this is acrylic on canvas. So Bruce, why don't you tell us a little bit about this painting?
Well, thank you, Mary. This is acrylic painting on canvas, and it's from a small photograph that I found from a second grade picture, and I wanted to contemporize it, blow it up, and put me in front of a grid, a colorful grid, just so it comes out at the viewer. And it was kind of a fun piece to do.
Yes, it looks like it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Was it a special year?
All of us have been through that, where they gather the class together for their yearly photograph, so they can document all the children who are in the class. And everybody has to dress up, and I had some kind of little bow tie, it looks like, on there. So
it's a very nice piece, and a great way to start this tour. And that's a water study. And this is a photographic collage. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Okay, this is a new direction I'm going with some of my photography, where I'm enjoying getting close-ups of things, be it water or a pencil or any simple object. And it becomes something else, I think, when you enlarge it or you get very close. I'd like to photograph with a microscope, too. I think that could be interesting.
I think that would be very interesting.
Yes.
This one is very interesting. It almost looks like there are pieces cut into it. And is that what it was done?
I believe that's two pieces that I combined. The right one, I added a little, I think I used a magic marker or something to get that orange right on the photograph. So as with the next one we'll talk about too, that sort of picked up more of the orange and a little closer view, the number 3. Okay.
So the next one is a closer water study, also photographic collage, and it definitely does give something very different when you look at these water droplets.
Yes, it does. I had fun with that too, and I have fun with all my work, as you know. And that might have been a close-up of raindrops on my car. And it's just kind of funny. You remember exactly where you were when you even took these abstract pictures. But
it kind of looks otherworldly.
Yeah, it does. And again, that's why I think I'd like to go even deeper into this, because it just resonates differently as you do that.
Right. Pretty neat.
Thanks.
And the next one is a pencil on paper, and this is a paper bag study. And these are some of the pieces that I really love, this real detail in looking at a drawing and in doing the drawing. And you like doing this.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, and I try to go back and forth. This is a rather academic approach, but I had been at a workshop somewhere, and I got to it early in the morning, and I just sometimes I just set up little displays in front of me, and I found this paper bag, and I did some warm-up drawings, and I sort of developed it. This was probably the 4th or 5th one that I did, that I just developed a little more. And again, I do it with one pencil, and you can get a lot of effects just with the edge of a pencil, the point of the pencil, and that's what intrigues me about doing a more realistic study like that.
It's amazing how you can get the dimension in it, and the shadowing in it. It's really...
as I said, this was the 4th or 5th one, so the first few weren't that great, but you sort of learn as you do them.
Right.
But it was fun to do.
It is great. And so the next piece is called The Awakening, and this is ink and photograph on paper. So this is quite the piece.
Again, combining the black lines, I think I did on a white piece of paper, and I sort of looked at that on my desk for a while, and then I cut out this blow-up of a coffee cup with a shadow that I did, and I put them together, and there was just something that I liked about it. It's kind of like the coffee cup looks like you're looking down at it, and yet it looks like it's against that background. So again, I like playing with that give the viewer a chance to say, well, what, how am I looking at this?
Right, and what is it?
Right, and what is it
it is
exactly?
interesting
Right.
because it does give you a different dimension of the coffee, of the mug.
Right, and of course I love shadows. Excuse me for interrupting.
I love the shadows too.
Right,
That's
right.
great. The shadows really add a great deal to them.
Thank you.
Plant shadow is the next piece, and this is acrylic on watercolor paper. So, shall we talk a little bit about this now?
Sure. That was a shadow that I saw one day in our house, and it was against the wall. My wife has a lot of plants in the house, and I quickly got a pencil and a paper, and I kind of sketched it, and just got the basic shapes, and then I later played out the shapes a little more intensely, and I still liked it, and I wanted to use a bright color for the background, and then a faded kind of grayish tone for the shadow, and I sort of like how it resonates.
I like the deep,
two tones.
Right. I like the deep yellow in it.
Yes.
It brings it to life. It kind of moves that shadow up forward.
Thank you. It does jump in front to the viewer.
It is very good.
Thank you.
Very nice piece. Our next piece is called Pear in Hand, and this is a photographic collage. And this is a very interesting piece because it takes a while to figure out what's going on here.
That's true.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Okay. That was fun because I have a habit of going to secondhand stores and finding interesting things. And I found this clear glass pear shape. And I was out actually in my driveway one day, and I was playing around with the lighting as the sun comes up. And I was putting paper on the floor and experiment. And then I held it with one hand. That's my hand, of course, holding the pear. And I shot a few shots, and this got interesting. So I said, I'll make an 8x10 print of that. And again, experiments,
It sounds like you experiment a lot.
I do, yes.
And it sounds like you get some pretty interesting results from this experimentation.
Thank you. I do like experimentation. I learn a lot. It's like a new vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. It is a new vocabulary.
Yeah.
But you get so many images in just this pear shape in the hand. It really gives you a great deal more imagery.
For me, it's a sort of a double-edged sword because I get so many ideas that I sometimes have to stop and just, I must have taken maybe 30 pictures of that pear with light. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes it borders on obsession, but often I know when to stop because I get too many ideas. You can spend, you could make 50 or 100 photographs of that pear with different lightings at night and strobe lights or whatever you want. It's just you've got to stop sometimes,
But at least you can stop. That's
I'm getting better at that.
Oh, that's good. Okay, this next piece is very interesting. This is Abstract 167. It's acrylic on paper, and I like abstracts because not only for the coloring usually and for the vivid colors and the images, but because people see different things in them. And so, why don't you tell us about this piece?
You're right. I think that's what appeals to me about abstraction is that everybody can read something differently in it. And this, for a minute after I had framed it, I said, well, it looks more like a snowman. But to me, but I guess, again, people, as you said, can read differently. And this, I think I cropped from a larger abstract that wasn't all that interesting. And I think sometimes it's more powerful or more impacting when you make something smaller, as opposed to having maybe a bland image larger. So I think that's where that came from, that particular piece.
Do you usually work on large pieces?
Yes, usually the size of that piece over there, about 18 by 24 inches. And sometimes I'd say 80% of the time I keep them large, but sometimes I like living with a lot of my work for a while, and then cropping some, actually throwing some away. I think it's like cleaning your house up if you're moving, I think sometimes it's good to clean out the clutter in your head, and especially with my ideas, I sometimes say, time to move on.
Mm-hmm. And so are you working on several pieces at once?
Yes, as I told you in the last interview, I do that all the time. Matter of fact, after this, I'm running to my studio to work on more of my photography things that I cut up and reassemble. And I've got a new one going with an octagon shape that's kind of repeated. And I'm working on the drawing, white pen on black paper, another thing that intrigues me. So I've got a few things going on at a time.
Do you keep extensive notes on ideas, or do you just work from...
That's a great question, Mary. I really don't. I keep a journal, not a daily one. I'm trying to get to that point, but it's usually when something hits me or an idea, or I see someone I haven't seen in a long time, and I reflect on that later. But I like to get to the point where I write every day, but not so much with my art ideas, because when I hit the studio, I close the door and I go. It just, the ideas pour out actually. And but that, my wife says, that's good, you go do that, because she says, I don't understand your thought process. And sometimes I don't either, It's
but
more...
the ideas just come forth.
And sometimes you'll take something so far, like even that drawing of the paperback, and then you'll say, okay, time to move on.
Well, that's great. So from an abstract piece, we're still going to kind of an abstract piece, but this is Reflections, New Britain, Connecticut. And this is a photograph.
Yes, correct.
So why don't you tell us about this piece?
I believe I was at the New Britain Fine Arts Museum, and if anyone's been there, I think as you go in, there's glass over the top of the entryway.
Right.
And me and my usual thing, looking around and wandering. I found that very interesting. They had these sections of mirrors. I mean, not glass, mirrors. And I just found that very intriguing, just looking up at it, and finding a good composition. And I like the fact that the top part's black and white and the bottom is more of a sepia tone. Again, that just caught my attention. I actually read a book about Hedy Lamarr, and I didn't really know anything about her. And as you and all of us probably know, she was a brilliant woman. And she evidently was working on some kind of a radar detention of bombs during World War II from submarines. And she was also a very famous model. And I like bringing people that I've either discovered through reading or met to life, contemporize them. And if you read from the upper left corner, it says Hedy Lamarr, inventor, paved the way for Wi-Fi. And she did. And we all use Wi-Fi now. And just a brilliant woman. The more I read, and I wanted to highlight her and use the bright oranges and just kind of set her within the frame there. And that was a fun painting to do.
It is. It's a very dynamic piece.
Thanks. And it'll probably go back in my living room because we like having it there.
It is. It's a wonderful piece.
Thank you.
I love the expression on her face as well.
It's kind of thoughtful.
Yes, very kind of not scary, but kind of thoughtful.
Yes.
And kind of elusive. That's the word I think I was looking for.
Right. You're so right. Very good.
Thank you. The next piece is called Outside the Box, and this is a photographic collage. I love the movement in this piece, so why don't you tell us about it?
Thank you, Mary. It's a piece I took a photo from my studio that I had here in Lee for about a year, and I used to get beautiful sunlight coming in, and I literally had a small box that I had painted white that I was going to do something with, and it was on the floor for some reason. The diagonal gray tones were from the shades, I think, in the window, and I sort of found that interesting, and I took a bunch of photographs. So I think this might be a combination of 4 different photographs that I reconfigured to make it somewhat interesting. And again, the sepia...
Interesting and totally different from the original box.
Right, exactly. And, again, with the black and white and the sepia tones that, again, intrigued me still.
Very neat.
Thank you.
The next piece is called Glass Play, and this is a photograph. So this is a very interesting piece. So tell us about this one.
Okay, this, again, a color photograph. I had purchased a piece of glass that was sort of like the funhouse kind of glass. It just,
yeah.
I can't, and it was only like 8 by 10 feet. And I started playing with it with some clear glasses that I had purchased in secondhand stores. And I started, and the color underneath the glass is a color abstract that I had done on paper. So I set the glass on the paper and the piece of glass I had purchased up against it. And I started getting these very interesting, kind of grainy, thoughtful images coming out. And I did many of those, more than I'd like to admit to, but again, I knew enough to then move on.
You must have quite the inventory of pieces that you can experiment with.
Well, I do sell work, but a lot of it I do keep, I have a lot of pieces in my house and in my studio. But it's great to get to the point where you can start doing this, going out and exhibiting them, and finding a home for them is always nice.
I'm sure it is. Well, this gives you a real good sample of the range of your talents.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What a range you have going through all this, yes.
Can be a double-edged sword. Right, but it is fun.
Okay. Our next piece is called Photographic Collage. It's a mixed media piece, and it's about 24 by 30. And so these are very small squares of various colors interspersed with these photographic images. So why don't you tell us about some of these images?
I'll try, Mary. All of the images are from photos that I've taken of either my work or things that have interested me. And it's part of a series I have going that I've probably done about 30 of these of all different sizes, where I cut up the photographs, reassemble them in some sort of grid, which is what this is. And first I had done a color grid on the canvas with acrylic, and then I had divided it up into small squares and just had fun every other square putting my photographs in it. And I took colors, strong colors, and then made them less intensive as it moved left or right, depending on where the strongest color tone was. And that was kind of fun. That's, trying to combine color tonality with photographs. And again, a new direction.
And are you auditioning the photos for these squares, or how are you deciding on this?
Well, that's an excellent question. It looks like with this one, I alternated a color one and then a black and white and a color and a black and white. So I'm trying different patterns to see which ones resonate better or do something for me or the viewer. So again, I'm doing a lot of these different sizes. They just really intrigue me visually, and they make some of my rather bland photographs look a lot more interesting.
I can.
When you reassemble
that's one
them,
way to do that.
Make use of old photos.
But I would think that the rearrangement is really interesting because it must give a very different feeling as you are going through.
That's a good observation because that's what got me really excited about, disassembling my photographs and reassembling them. Makes for a whole different image, which is intriguing.
And you can see so many different images, and you then can focus either on the whole picture or just on the individual images.
A lot of people like going up real close.
Yeah, and check
and
out
other
the
people
images,
come back.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
So our next piece is called Water Study 3, which is quite the photo.
Yeah,
so
we're looking
why
at
don't you
that.
tell us about that?
Sure. This is actually a close-up of some water droplets on my car one morning. And I got very close, and the more I looked at it, and then when I blew it up, this 8 by 10 size, it got even more interesting with the long shadows off the front of the water. And again, I think sometimes photographs can become something else. You know, like as you said earlier, almost an abstract in itself.
Right.
Like you said, somebody might see something else in that. You know, like I don't know. But that just intrigues me. You know, that you can just take something very simple and it becomes almost that could be sculptural. I mean, that could be a sculpture almost.
It does become. It comes three-dimensional.
Exactly.
And the shadows do that to this, and so it does give it a totally different landscape look almost.
You're right, and I think that's why I like photography a lot, because it lends itself to so many different ways of looking at something. You know, but that's part of the challenge of art. You know, just finding something that's a little different and has your own mark on it.
Vivid.
Quite honestly, this piece is torn up paintings that I had done on paper, abstract paintings, and a few of before I tore them up, I was going to discard them. So actually, I started tearing them up, and again, they were on the bigger piece of paper. And when I got smaller with it, it seemed to get a little more interesting to me, you know, and especially when I overlapped and combined them. Again, it lends itself to the viewer to go in and out, and sort of another thing I like playing with, giving the viewer ways of walking into a piece. You know, that intrigues me too. And I always like doing that when we go to a museum. My wife and I we like finding different ways of getting into something we might not understand, you know, an artist that maybe whose work we don't know. You know, I think that's a good quality for a reputable artist, to be able to, you know, indicate different ways that a person can enter a painting. You know, does that make sense?
It does make sense. This one is very intriguing, because I would think it's very inspiring for people to try to look at their own work in different ways, and even taking it apart and putting it together in different ways, and creating a whole new picture.
And I mean, a lot of people are quite sensitive about their work and maybe a little reticent to destroy it, but I think after a while you get less, what's the word, precious about it, you know, and I'm not saying I'm brave or anything, but I've just done so much work that it's kind of nice to just reconstruct something that you've done that you maybe weren't that happy with, you know, and as opposed to just discarding it.
Right.
You know.
But it becomes something totally new, which is very interesting.
Right.
But it's interesting because when you have something up for a while, you also don't look at it very carefully any longer. So taking it apart and putting it together in a new way gives you a whole new insight.
You hit on another interesting thing, is that every time I had a show, I mean, once you elevate your work literally, you know, off the drawing board, and you're so concentrated with it, you know, onto a wall, it becomes something very different. It literally elevates, literally and figuratively, your work, you know, and I think I mean, I still scan these all, remember each one of them, but it's just a different context, which also adds to, you know, putting artwork up, I think. You know.
And when you do put your artwork up on the wall,
good to reflect and go back and forth. And again, because that's why I do so much different work, I like, as I said in the earlier interview, changing vocabularies all the time.
It does.
You know, if I'm working on one thing, it might contribute something to the next, you know.
It's great. The next piece is called Figure Study, and this is pencil on paper. And this is a very strong image with the way you've drawn this. So why don't you tell us a little more about it?
Well, this is a classic, what every artist does, and that is figure study, right? I probably was in a class, I think, and first of all, you usually start most classes with quick drawings. You get loose, you know, 2-minute drawings, and I think obviously there are 2 different drawings of the same gentleman, and each one of these I think was a 20-minute drawing. So I sort of concentrated on his upper body on both of these just to develop it. And again, just with one pencil. You know, I mean, there's a lot of tonality and muscle tone you can get out of just using the side of a pencil, or, as I said earlier, the point, or, you know.
But defining the muscles and all, that's really wonderful that you were able to do that.
Thank you.
Quick drawing and And especially, and also the look on his face in each of these.
Pretty intense. Yeah.
Very intense.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes when you're in that context of drawing in a class, the models are very serious, and they hold poses, and that's part of what you do.
The next is a collage on canvas, and this is an acrylic and photo collage. And this has Shades de Mondrian in it.
Interesting you say that, because he's one of my many favorite artists. I love how he would break up the surface of a canvas. And actually, I had been reading a book about his work around the time I was doing these, and still doing these, with the photographs and color. It's just another element, I think, to put in a grid that interests me. And I love his work, and sometimes, look, all artists take things from other artists.
Absolutely.
And I like taking in a concept and then just adding another layer that, just to get me thinking. And it has a different kind of balance to it then,
I think each of the collage pieces, though, has been elevated by being with the other collage pieces as well as with the colored blocks.
Well, you have a great art background too, so that's a great comment. Thank you. Yeah, it certainly does.
But I think it's wonderful. I love the pieces, the collage pieces. I love the different shading in them. I love the colors that you pick up.
Thank you. And again, the alternating the black and white colors still intrigues me. I've done some all color, some all black and white. And it's just interesting to jump back and forth.
You must have great patience, too, to rearrange all these little pieces.
It keeps my mind in here somehow operating, so I don't get too distracted.
It is wonderful.
Thank you.
The next piece is Homage to a Hopeful Traveler, and this is acrylic on canvas. This is quite a beautiful piece as well.
Thank you.
So tell us about this piece.
This has a lot of personal feelings to it, because it's actually, the image in the middle is my mother-in-law. Unfortunately, she died a few years ago. But this is her when she was 25, and she was rather striking. And the quote from the top around the top left is, "To travel hopefully is better than to arrive." And we probably all heard that saying. And that just resonates with how I knew her. She was certainly a 1 foot in front of the other person, and that's how she dealt with her life. And she had a pretty hard life, but she left a lot of ephemera and paperwork of hers from when she was working a long time ago, which my wife was kind enough to give to me, and I have some of it, which I'm not sure what to do with it, but this was from, again, a tiny, maybe inch square photograph of her from when she was, I think, 25 in this picture. Always got along with her because I respected her space and time, and I think that's important with all my dealings with people, is just to respect where they come from,
So did she ever see this?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
And what did she think?
Oh, she liked my work, she was always supportive, and she said, "You made me look pretty young." I said, "That's what your picture was."
It's great. It's a very great piece.
And again, like I had said earlier, that's another phase I was in of taking, people I've known and elevating them, contemporizing them, and keeping people in the conversation. That's another important thing for me, because I think everybody has a story, past, present.
Right. Do you have somebody in mind now that you would like to?
Oh, so many people I've had. I've been so fortunate with my artwork, because I got away from it for a long time when I was young. But so many people have been supportive and, been instrumental at certain points in my life to continue doing it, because often you get tired of it, or frustrated, or like a writer, writer's block. Fortunately, I don't have that, but I have several people I'd like to elevate like this.
That's a great way to do it.
And again, it's keep people in the conversation in contemporary, which is, I mean, you ever find like old photographs and you almost forget who they were? Mm-hmm. And I think that's sad, that
it is sad.
Or you go through, or even with photographs we used to see of her, and if you don't mark it on the back in the old days, I mean, now it's all on the camera, but and it's sad, because there's some beautiful pictures I've seen that are just, and you don't even know who it is,
Right.
But I guess we all have them as families
this is a good
grow.
way to think about.
Yes.
To think about making something more of the person you knew.
Absolutely, and why not? Because
Absolutely.
Everybody has a story.
The next piece is called Shadow Study, and this is a photo collage, and this is really quite an interesting image. So why don't you tell us more about this?
Sure, Mary, thank you. This is actually two different photographs. I believe this is one when I put some water in a clear glass, and I literally held my camera and I swirled the water in the glass like this. It took some pictures of it. And it's interesting when they came out, I mean, it looks like almost the eye of a hurricane or something. But again, the simplicity of it all just resonated with me to combine the pictures, and they almost go together. Again, because it is such a simple idea, but it became a lot more than I thought it would. And again, I combined the two images, the two photos. Another thing I like to do.
It looks like a very foreign landscape.
Yes, doesn't it?
Really does.
Yes.
Yeah. Or the eye of a hurricane.
Yeah, there's just that movement.
Yes.
I like the movement.
It has tremendous movement.
Yes, that I like.
Yeah, and I think combining the black and white with some color also just gave it great depth.
Thank you. I will probably do more of those. Yeah.
The next piece is the photo grid on canvas. And this piece is very interesting for all the movement that it has on it. So tell us about this one.
That it has. I think I might have been at a workshop and I got involved with, again, a grid of small boxes, and I wanted to just use lines going all different directions. And it creates its own movement. And another thing that I liked when I saw it finished is the darker tones of some of the squares and the lighter ones, which I had never really thought about while I was doing it. But that, to me, it got a little more interesting.
Much more interesting. It does give it greater depth as well as the movement.
Thank you. And a lot of these I'd like to do a lot larger, too. I think that would even be more of an impact. It's...
Right. Because if you did it smaller, you'd be losing the movement.
Correct.
And
I think like this and the cut photos that I do, I would really like to do something maybe 10 feet square.
Okay, Mary, go ahead.
The next piece is called Photo Grid on Canvas. And this is a wonderful kind of a quilted piece, kind of a quilt of life, I think, of your pictures. So why don't you tell us a little more about this?
Well, thank you, Mary. Several people who have seen this in this show have said that the quilt analogy, and this one is a lot of the squares obviously butted right up against each other, which gives it a different feel. And again, there are photos that I've taken of my work or simple objects. It just reads so differently sometimes the more I do these. And that's why I keep doing them, because they're like pages in a book. I keep wanting to know, well, where's this story going,
Where's the story?
Yeah, and because it is a story, a visual story for me. And often sometimes when you're doing a series like this, for me anyway, I'm sure other artists go through this, you get to a point where you hit the door, you hit the wall, and you say, okay, I'm moving on.
Right.
So maybe it'll come to that. I mean, but so far it hasn't. It still really intrigues me, this disassembled photographs and then putting them together in a different pattern. So I'm excited about that. I just have so many more ideas.
It is very exciting. It's an exciting piece.
And it's a little different.
It is different.
So I like different.
It's interesting also to see the evolution that you're going through as you're making these different pieces.
Thank you. And that's why I wanted to put some earlier ones, and this is a rather later one in the same show.
All right, Mary, go ahead.
Our last piece is called Williamstown Shadow, which is a photograph. And this piece has lots of intrigue in it. So give us a little more information.
I will, Mary. Thank you. I had been going to the Clark Museum in Williamstown the past 6-7 months doing a drawing class where they would take out of their archives a lot of famous prints, and you get to copy the prints. And after we went to the class one day, we usually go out for lunch in Williamstown. We happened to go into the center of Williamstown, and we were going into the restaurant, and I saw this shadow with this empty table and some chairs outside, and it just sort of intrigued me as its own composition, you know, with the bricks on the ground and combination of ovals and rectangles and you know, diagonal shapes going, and it just became a composition. And then when I blew it up, you know, 8 by 10, it got even more interesting. And it was kind of that thing you just see sometimes, and you got to have your camera and take a picture of it.
Right. And you need to be ready.
Yes, and as you indicate too, I'm sure, is that often, you know, 5 minutes later that would be different.
Right.
Or the shadow would move, or the sun would have gone in behind a cloud.
Right.
So sometimes I think that's another thing about photography, is that sometimes you just have to be ready for something that maybe it hasn't happened yet. You know what I'm saying? It's just
you never know when it's going to show up.
Yes, or how, because sometimes I've ran to the car, or I forgot my phone, and I get out to a landscape or the sunset or whatever, and it's gone. It just wasn't as intense as even 5 seconds ago. Right. And I think we've all experienced that.
So can people see more of your work? Do you have a gallery or a studio?
Yes, I just moved my studio up into Pittsfield, the Clock Tower Artists, they're called, and we're up on the 3rd floor. And it's a great space. They were building out spaces for artists, and I signed on the dotted line and have a space. I've only been there since November, so that's like last month. But we already had an open studio, and I actually I sold a piece there. I sold a few prints. I sold about 40 of my cards that I make. Not that that's the most important thing. The more important thing is that I'm working with a bunch of very nice, great artists, men, women, different ages, different styles, which is something that I realized I missed a lot, because, everybody has their own schedule, but often you'll not walk into someone's studio and say, "Well, I like that piece you just did," and you'd start a conversation, or they'd come into my space and say, "Well, what's going on here?" And I think I missed that a lot, and it's good. It's like, I'm sure every profession. I mean, teachers talking to other teachers, or electricians. There's a common vocabulary in those careers.
That's true. And it's very inspiring.
Yes, it is, and I've already learned a lot from several people there, and just looking at their work. And they're all talented people from different walks of life, and who have varying degrees of time to be in the studio too, which is an interest in itself. So that's been a lot of fun, and great. I hope to be there a while, because I like my studio in Lee, but this just was a better opportunity for me. That's
great.
And you're welcome to come up anytime and visit.
Well, thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This has been wonderful. You did a great job on hanging this exhibit. And
thank you very much.
It's really been very
Each one is very different. Each time I have a show, and what I pick. And I'm glad it just worked out. And for me, it's all about how it reads. The breathing room, as you indicated earlier, sometimes smaller pieces next to larger pieces. That's important to me.
Right.
So a person can walk over and just look at that without seeing something else right next to it. I think sometimes that's something that I like to do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.